Hey YouTube, this is Archangel for Truth, and my video for you today is a part 2 to my previous video, driving as a right and not as a state pay-to-play privilege. So in my first video I discussed what are rights and where do we get our rights. And as a refresher on that, I will briefly discuss that. So, a question for those that do not agree to this. And if you wish to respond in your comments, by all means, go ahead and do so. But my question is, where do our rights come from? Do they come from the government? Do our rights exist prior to the existence of the government? So if I asked you, do you have the right or the freedom of speech with or without the government, how would you respond? You see, the question is very important to understanding what our rights are and what our rights are not. Now, there are individuals that believe, they honestly believe that driving is a privilege. They believe this because that's what they've been told. But the question is, who told them that? So, I can tell you where it comes from, and you can do your own research, and you can confirm what I'm saying. Or you can simply believe the lie and not investigate it at all. So, the question of where your rights come from, and whether or not driving is indeed a right or a privilege, that is a determination that law enforcement has repeated over and over and over and over and over again. Where they got that is actually from the Department of Transportation in the vehicle codes. So the DMV and the Department of Transportation made the determination of their own that driving is a privilege. Now, that is very important because the next question is, does the Department of Transportation, does the DMV, have a right or have the authority to make a determination about what are rights or what are privileges? Now, if you're going according to the Constitution, they do not have such authority. That authority, according to the Constitution, would be to the legislature. So the question then comes, has the legislature, has the Congress ever made a determination that driving is a privilege? The answer is no, they never did. They never established that driving is a privilege. So what that means is that when the agency made such a determination, they did so as an abuse of discretion of their authority. So, since that is correct, and anyone who wishes to investigate my claim about this will find that what I'm saying is 100% correct. The legislature never gave to the Department of Transportation the authority to make determinations pertaining to rights or privileges. That authority does not fall under their regulating authority. So, but nevertheless, this is what they go to as making a determination whether or not driving is a right. So the problem exists with a lot of words that are being used. So, for example, people who are, let's say, pro-privilege against those who believe it's a right will call driving as driving, whereas you have the others, they would call it traveling. Now, either way, it really doesn't matter. And here's why. Because the right to drive or the right to travel, both of them are rights. They are rights that are covered under the Ninth Amendment. So, for those not familiar, I will explain what the Ninth Amendment is. The Ninth Amendment is the amendment in the Bill of Rights that says that you have rights that are not enumerated by the Constitution. What does that mean? Not enumerated by, or unenumerated rights? Well, it means what it says, that they are not listed by the Constitution. But nevertheless, you have these rights. And the government, as it says, may not deny or disparage these rights. Not even with agencies as part of a regulation scheme. So you have the right, the freedom of speech. You have the right to bear arms, to protect yourself. You have these as rights. Now, if, for example, the government said to you, well, you're not going to be able to speak unless you pay us a registration fee, and we're going to determine how much speech you can have and where you're going to be able to have that, would you agree that that is something that the government has the authority to do? Sadly, there are those individuals out there that would believe that. Look at the people in China. They're so controlled that their ability to speak their minds freely is hampered. So, but now how does this apply to when it comes to driving or traveling? Either way, it comes back to that original question. Where do your rights come from? So if our rights are inherent to us as part of our humanity, as sovereign beings, as beings that have been given rights as from a loving creator, inalienable rights, then our rights are not given to us by the government. But if you are of the belief that your rights do come from the government, then the government can take your rights away, and they can determine to what extent you have rights and what extent you don't. So the Ninth Amendment is very important in being able to determine what your rights are. Because if the state or the federal government may not deny or disparage these rights, and the very fact that the Bill of Rights recognizes you have rights that have not been listed points to the fact that they exist. So I got a little helicopter overhead, so I'm going to let that pass by and continue on. So, you have a right to drive. The agency, the Department of Transportation, the DMV, do not have the authority to make any determination about what are rights and what are privileges. Now, I said before that I do agree with certain regulations and certain authority to have laws and so forth, when those laws are fair and not infringing upon people's rights. And so, for example, I believe that the state has the regulated authority to put out a stop sign and require that people stop for that stop sign for safety reasons. If people just ran stop signs, we'd have all sorts of issues. So that makes sense. But now, if the state decided we're going to require people to pay every time that they stop at a stop sign, I would disagree. And so what the state is doing now by requiring people to pay to drive, to be licensed, to have their vehicles registered and so forth, is where they have run aground of your rights and have, as an abuse of discretion, abused their authority by completely infringing an unenumerated right. And so that is where we are at. And sadly, the far majority of people in law enforcement are too stupid, quite frankly, to understand that such a right exists. They are told by the state, we want you to impose these regulations. And so they are rewarded for issuing citations and therefore benefiting by policing for profit. And so the state has literally turned driving into a pay-to-play privilege. All the while, they have infringed upon a Ninth Amendment right by denying and disparaging via their regulating authority. Can't get that one out. So it's very important that as people who believe in rights and people who believe in having a measure of common sense law, that we understand the differences. So I'm going to conclude this video here, and if you agree with this, maybe you could leave a comment as to why you do agree. If you disagree, maybe you would like to leave a comment as to why you disagree. Either way, what I have said as regards to the Department of Transportation and the DMV not having that authority to make determinations pertaining to what are privileges and what are rights is correct. There is no legislative, no congressional grant to them to make said determination. It is an abuse of discretion, and hopefully there will be an opportunity to prove that in a court of law. And then ultimately, depending on whether or not the Supreme Court wishes to adhere to the Constitution, because quite frankly they are hit and miss on the Constitution in many ways. So please like and share this video if you would, because quite frankly there's a lot of people who are misinformed about what their rights are, who gives them the rights, and what our privileges are, and who can give those privileges to them as well. So like and share, And until my next video, God bless you and take care. Bye-bye.